So we've got sort of three sort of themes we're hoping to discuss this evening. So we're just sort of wrapping up on that sort of theme of storytelling and narrative. And we're going to move on to now to talk a little bit about directing and the art of direction, because both have directed things, differently, and we'll learn a little bit about that as we go. But before we do that, we're just going to hear now from well, it doesn't really need an introduction, but somebody who really knows how to direct, and he's got a little message for us this evening. You might have seen this already, but here's George Miller for you.
The creative process is something I've been interested in all my life. Any form of artistry, the process is the same almost always. And that is an interplay between the intellect and the intuition. In the collaborative arts, there is usually one voice, ultimately. It's usually somebody who not only has the inspiration for the first idea, but has got the mechanism, the skill, the craft to actually progress it and make it a full work. The person who has that has to do one very important thing, and that is create the strategies with which everybody else can work. They have to be coherent, elegant, holistic strategies that unify the piece. The skill that I see in great filmmakers, I now see in Kojima-san's work.
You love her. There it is.
Oh, that's strong. Very strong. We're in the hands here of a master in terms of visual representation, taking out of the imagination and making it real on a screen. But that's, to some degree, the necessary surface of the thing. I think thematically, the player is being invited into an experience that is very, very profound and very deep. The purpose of story is to make meaning out of life. I mean, it's fundamental to us. It's the only way we can explain the world and our existence. What's great about Kojima-san's work is the way that you take games and you take what we call cinema and overlaps the two.
My body may be present, but my soul is on the beach. I'm already dead.
Story is a kind of a tricky word, because story is not just plot or a series of events. Stories are really the experience offered up to the audience. You can tell a series of events, but in the way that you orchestrate it. Just as you might take a group of notes and play them, but not in an inspiring way. But if they do have an elegance in their orchestration, they have meaning to you. That's what powerful story is. And that's what I sense there. Issues of morality, the purpose of life, the proper conduct of life, all the things that all great stories deal with. To take the notion of death and play, it seems to be a very, very original way to do it. It's something deep down, one way or another, we all confront. And that's already interesting. To have this sort of game which seems to be non-violent in the more traditional way, and yet connect you to the rest of the world. Something I've always thought was really interesting. Everything in this room, everything on the roadways we travel, carry with them a tremendous amount of history. We walk in each other's paths, and that's what's happening in this game. So even though you're alone, it seems to be you're following paths of complete strangers, and yet somehow they have an effect on you. That's a very, very powerful analogy to what happens in life. It feels to me that the player can have that experience made manifest before them in a very direct way and in a very original way. When you put things out there into the world, you really don't know. You can anticipate what it might be like, but it takes quite a bit of time before the world tells you what the work is like. Sometimes it takes a long, long time. There's famous stories of artist Van Gogh who had no idea that his paintings were going to be so significant. And I think that happens with so much work.
Glad you made it.
That's another thing about Kojima-san. I mean, he's proving to be a master in this new arena, relatively new arena, and bringing all the skills, filmmaking, of drama, of design, and putting it into a work, and we get meaning from it. That's the difference between something that's just on the surface and something that's very profound. I like to describe it as as having a lot of iceberg under the tip. And I feel that this game has a lot of iceberg under the tip.
See? It's like I'm not even here. Same as it ever was.
There's no cultural evolution unless new ideas are offered up. Often they're provocative. Often they shift the norm to some degree. But there is no evolution unless that happens. That's the history of all creativity. That doesn't come easily. Oh, I'll just do something radically different. Because something can be radically different and basically alienating. It's just, there's nothing to connect me to it. It takes a much more sophisticated level of thinking to actually make something like that work. To understand where the world is today and where it might be down the track, and then to interpret it according to his own creative impulses. And that's where the creative courage comes in. Somebody like Kojima-san who's prepared to push the boundaries. And that's why his work is so important.
For the players.
George Miller there. Now, George was talking about creative courage, Hideo, and picking up also what Nicolas was saying about sort of, if you're going to push the boundaries, sometimes not everybody's going to like it. How does that risk make you feel when you're making a new project?
ですね、一人でやる分にはいいんですけど、
Well, if you're doing it alone, it's not a big problem.
今回ですね、
But this time,
自分でスタジオ立ち上げて、
I opened up my own
スタッ
studio
フ集めて、
and I collected
事務所を借り
staffs
て、
and rented an office.
ちょっとニコラスとはちょっと違
A
う。
little bit different than Nicholas, maybe.
失敗ができないと。
I can't fail.
これまでの30年間は、
Because 30 years of game
失敗して
creation,
も、会社辞めたらいい。
you know, I didn't care because if I fail, I will just leave the company. So I had no pressure.
今回も
But
もの
this time,
づくりの上ではプレッシャーないんですよね。
Creating something
新しいものっていう
gave me no pressure
これを
to create something
皆さんがど
new.
う思うかとかあんまりそんなこと考え
And
ない
I didn't really care about what people thought about it,
あ
but
る程度の成功しないと
I have to be successful in a way because I have to keep my studio going.
っていうのもあって、そこはちょっとこう
So that was a little pressure, different this time.
でもそれで作るものが変わるかというとそういうことは
But
なく
it doesn't really change what I
より
create.
慎重に
I just be a little bit
いわ
cautious,
ゆる右脳で考えたものを
like thinking on my right brain, and I kind of output it
今回は
before.
ちょっともうちょっと左脳
But
で
this time I use a little left side of my brain
ちょ
too,
っとこう計算精緻に計算し
and
なが
maybe
ら
calculate a little bit
ちょっと
before doing my output.
防御とか
And I kind of,
しながら
you know, defend and be cautious
作っていったっていう
and
感じで
create
すけど
what I create in Death Stranding.
ただできたものは昔と変わらないかもしれないですけど、ね、
But maybe what you see, the finished product, may not be so different from my past product.
So has the business side compromised the vision a little bit?
妥協は毎回あります。それ
Yeah, I compromise a lot every time,
スケジュールとか納期とか
like scheduling
特
or
にゲー
you
ムの
know
場合
when I
は
have to
メモ
finish the
リが
game.
足らなくなったりとか
Especially the game, I have to battle with the memory size, and
発生するので
every day there's
その
these
都度
small
その都度
problems
決断を
popping
して
up. So I have to really decide on the spot every
なん
day.
でニコラスも言ってますけど、
Nicholas also said
やっぱり僕ら二人とも
we both
企画をしながらディレ
have
クシ
to
ョンし
kind
て
of
プロデュースもするので、
produce, but also
やっぱ
start
りディレ
with the
クターだけだ
concept.
と
And
バ
it's
ジェ
not
ッ
just
トを握って
directing.
ないので、
If you're a director, you don't have the
い
budget,
くら使っていいのかは分から
and
ない。
you don't know how much you could spend.
ここが重要だと思うんです。
And this is really important,
デルトロ
yes.
監督も
Like
プロデュース
Guillermo del Toro said, he
やっぱり
does
やりたいこ
producing
とを
as
するに
well.
は
If you want to do
自分が財
something
布を
you
握
want
っ
to
ている
do,
とか
you have to
そんなこ
have
とも分かっていない
the money, and you have to have the understand about money and also know
こ
about
こは
people.
一番重要かもしれ
And
ない。
I think that's really important.
でそこを握っていれば
And if you have
企
that,
画を変えるでも
You could change the
すごく
concept
自分の中
or-
で自由が利くので。
you know, it's a freedom that you have.